Good morning, Ovidalcy Middle School students. This is Mr. Woolley, and we are starting a new unit today, Module 2, or Unit 2, Lesson 1. And we're starting to work with integers, and we're going to start with our first lesson, opposite quantities combined to make zeros. So let's just take a look real quick at some basic concepts here of negative numbers and positive numbers. Negative numbers are left of 0 on a number line. Positive numbers are right of 0 on a number line. Negative numbers get smaller as you move left of the number line. Positive numbers get larger as you move right in the number line. It can be described as a loss, a drop, a decrease, below sea level, etc. when you're referring to negative numbers. Or positive numbers, on the other hand, can be described as a gain, an increase, a rise, above sea level, etc. Negative numbers use a negative sign, and positive numbers do not use signs. Negative numbers are the opposite of positive numbers. Positive numbers are the opposite of negative numbers. And what do they share? Both do appear on a number line. All right. So, we're working with number lines today. Counting up, starting at 0, corresponds to positive numbers, and counting down, starting at 0, corresponds to negative numbers. Now, you see a picture of our number line there. We have our 0, and then we move on with our positives, which you've been using most of your life. And then we start moving to the left of the 0 with our negatives. Negative 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Where do you start, or where do you begin when locating a number on the number line? Start at 0. So every time you get ready to start something, we start at that 0 spot. What do you call the distance between a number and 0 on a number line? It's the absolute value of a number. How far a number is from 0. So these straight brackets around this 7 here, that's absolute value. It's not parentheses that are curved, it's straight brackets. Straight brackets mean absolute value. So how far is 7 from 0 on a number line? It's 7 places. How far is negative 7 from 0 on a number line? 7 places. The absolute value of a number is always positive because all it represents is a distance from 0. So what's the relationship between 7 and negative 7? They have the same absolute values, same distance from 0, but they're opposites. They're additive inverses. And that's a term you're going to hear sometimes, additive inverses. It just means the same thing as opposites. So additive inverses, opposites, same thing. All right. Now you're going to hear them refer over the next unit or so to the integer game. The integer game is just when you draw cards and they have numbers on them. Like, for example, here, somebody drew cards, and there's a 5, a -5, a -4, and an 8. And a lot of times they're going to ask you to get the total of those numbers that you drew. So, for example, here it says, what is the sum, the addition total, of the cards shown? Well, here's how we're going to do this. Start at 0, just like we talked about in the previous page. So I have my little dot here, start at 0. And the first card is 5, so I move 5 to the right. Now, I go just up just a tiny bit from that spot, put a little dot there. My next card's a -5, so I move 5 to the left. Right now I'm back at the 0. Go up a tiny bit and start a new arrow. Next card was -4, so move left 4. So now I'm at the -4, as you can see. And go up a tiny bit, and then now I have a +8, so now I move 8 to the right, so 4. That is where I stopped at, was a +4. So the sum of those is going to be a 4. What's the final position on the number line? 4. What card or combination of cards do you need to get back to 0? Well, if I'm sitting here at the 4, if I want to go to the 0, I need a -4 that would take me back to a 0. All right, the additive inverse. Use the number line to answer each of the following questions. How far is 7 from 0, and what direction? Start here, and there's 7. It's 7 places to the right of 0, 7 units. What's the opposite of 7? -7. How far is -7 from 0, and which direction? Well, start with 0, and I have to move left 7 units. So 7 units to the left. All right, next up, moving on to page 4. Thinking back to our previous work, explain how to use the counting on method to represent the following. While playing the integer game, the first card selected as a 7, and the second card selected as a -7. Well, if we were going to do that, we start at 0. Since my first card was a +7, I move right 7. And then after that, my second card's a -7. So now I'd go up just a tiny bit and draw a new arrow moving left 7. And I would end at 0. So what does that tell us about the sum of 7 and its opposite? 7 plus negative 7 are going to equal 0. Now it says look at the curved arrows you drew for 7 and negative 7. What relationship exists between these two arrows that support your claim about this? Well, the arrows are the same distance from 0, they're just opposite directions. And do you think this holds true for the sum of any number and its opposite? Yes, the sum of any number and its opposite will always be 0. Doesn't matter if it's 2 plus negative 2, a negative 5 plus a positive 5. They're always going to add up to 0. All right, let's take a look at some examples here. All right, for number 1, it says you have 2 cards with a sum of negative 12 in your hand. What 2 cards could you have? Well, if I had 2 cards that were a negative 12, I could have a negative 6 and a negative 6. All right, and I could have like a bunch of different cards there. I could have had like a negative 10, negative 2, so on. But negative 6 would be a good one, just because they're both the same. Now you add 2 more cards to your hand, but the total sum of those cards remains the same, negative 12. Here's some different examples of 2 cards you could choose. Well, if you ever draw 2 more cards, but you want your previous total just to stay the same, pick 2 opposite numbers there, like a 2 and a negative 2. It means you would be at negative 12, you'd add 2, but then move left back 2 again, or 5, negative 5. Anytime you add opposites together, it's just going to be a total of 0. So you really don't end up moving away from that negative 12. All right, so here we're just talking about like some terms. From talking about like elevation. If you're talking about like above and below sea level, well, you might call it 500 feet above sea level or 500 feet below sea level. That's the positive version. That's the negative version. If you're talking about money, some examples would be like, oh, if you deposit $100, well, you might withdraw $100. Positive version, negative version. Temperature, well, 5 degrees above 0 or 5 degrees below 0. Positive version, once again, our negative version. Football, a loss and a gain of yards. Well, you could lose 3 yards or you could gain 3 yards. That's the negative version. That's the positive version. So words can be used to describe these types of situations. All right. On number 3, it says the numbers h and k are the same distance from 0. Write an equation to represent this. Well, h is some negative number, and k is some positive number. But if they're the same distance from 0, if you take those two, h plus k, it's going to equal 0, because opposite numbers always add up to 0. All right, our last one of the day here. During a football game, Kevin gained 5 yards in the first play. Then he lost 7 yards in the second play. How many yards does Kevin need in the next play to get the team back to where they started? Show your work. All right, so he gained 5 yards. So if we look at a number line here, I start at 0 and I gained 5 yards. On the second play, he lost 7. So go up there a tiny bit and then move left 7. Now you're at negative 2. Now if I want to get back to where he started, the original line of scrimmage, you have to get 2 positive numbers to get back to the 0. So it'd have to be a 2 that I'm looking for there. All right. So thanks for watching. Have a great day. Make sure you try the practice and Schoology afterwards. That's actually a homework grade.